welcome, Mr.
Thank you.
Paolo Macchiarini. How does this feel, sitting here?
I am well, thank you.
What's it like to be in Sweden?
Well, given the events that have happened in the last years, it's not a pleasure to come back to Sweden because of the social scrutiny that I have thanks to the media. So it's a sort of weird sensation, not pleasant.
Just recently there came a very important decision for you that the prosecutors in Sweden decided not to press charges. How did you receive that news?
Well, actually, it was Björn that immediately contacted me and told me the news. So let me first of all thank the police for this investigation, because of course they did a very truthful and very detailed investigation, investigating every single detail and interviewing so many people that possibly would have had involvement into the criminal allegations. And a report of 55,000 pages and more than 80 interviews around and across the world speak for themselves. So,
do you feel free and exonerated now?
As I said, I'm very, very glad that the police came to this conclusion, because of course it's the total opposite as the public domain has been given my portrait in recently. So they investigated the real facts and they show it as we expected, the reality that we didn't shorten the life of the patients or prolong the pain or the distress of the patient, but just did, in the best interest of the patient, our job, which is possibly to save the lives of the patients.
At the same time, the prosecutor said that they would have pressed charges for not having the permits and for violating two other laws, but there was a statute of limitations. What's your view on that?
Well, I'm afraid I cannot answer because I didn't know about this.
Okay. The permits, läkemedelsprövning, and the permit from Etikprövningsnämnden, the Ethics Commission. The prosecutor said that they believe that you violated those laws, but they could not press charges now because it was such a long time ago.
Right. Well, you must understand that and I'm sure that you and everybody understands, I came here in 2010, hired by KI, and of course I could not speak Swedish and was here on a visiting professorship basis. There was a situation where I was submitted to supervisors that were appointed as responsible of taking all these administrative steps. And of course I did what I have been told to do. So,
are you speaking about Karolinska Institutet or the Karolinska Hospital now?
No, I'm just speaking about Karolinska Hospital. Of course there were figures there that had this dual position, being a doctor at the Karolinska Hospital, but being as well an academician at Karolinska Institutet. So, as in other countries, UK, Spain, Italy, United States and Russia, I followed always the local administration rules based on those that were responsible of taking the appropriate permissions.
But here in Sweden, you as the responsible surgeon should have taken care of those permissions and you didn't. Do you see this as a critique?
Yes, I'm afraid that I must disagree because there was a person who was appointed by my chairman, the chairman of my department, to take over and care about all these permissions. And this person was the only responsible of doing this, because of course I couldn't sign any paper in Swedish, written in Swedish, because I cannot read the Swedish.
But this is still the doctor's responsibility.
What do you mean with this?
With the permits.
My only responsibility is to follow the rules that I have from my supervisors and from my bosses, to say so, and the responsibility with the patients. And I thought by that time that trusting the responsibles, the clinician and the academician responsible for doing this was perfectly normal. I didn't have any chance, or let's say, I didn't have any reason don't to trust them, because I was totally new. And of course I relied on them, and this is proven. There are documents, tons of documents that prove this.
Regarding the surgeries, the patients' deaths, and the time they had before they died, do you have any regrets today?
Would you a little bit more extrapolate the question, because it's a really vague question, in the sense that, I'm sorry.
Do you feel that you would have done something differently, that they might have lived longer or in less pain? Do you feel regrets about that?
Listen, first of all, what kind of patients are we talking about? Because the general population and yourself know that possibly I have operated only the transplant patients, right? Or the patients included in this report, which is absolutely not the case. I have operated many other patients in Sweden.
Yeah, but these 3 patients in Sweden, there has been multiple reports saying that they were not in immediate danger of death and that their suffering may have been prolonged.
Well, actually, the only report that I must take into account is the police report. And it is stated, as far as I know, but maybe Björn can correct me, that every healthcare professional that was involved in the treatment did his best for the best of the patient. And
but regardless of the police report, there are still multiple reports that criticizes your procedures.
Right. We would need to be a little bit more specific so we can talk about each individual report. But the general assumption is that the patients were very complex and had life-threatening diseases, where most of the time, as the report, the real and only report that evaluated all the evidences demonstrates, we didn't shorten the patient's life.
Others disagree and say that they could have lived longer and in less pain.
Right. I'm open to every critique, of course, and accept critiques if they are constructive.
But you don't think that you did anything central wrong?
Right. I didn't say that yet. I'm just saying, for instance, that the first patient that came and we transplanted, he had a life expectancy according to the most known thoracic surgery department in the world of 6 months. And they just offered him palliation or just nothing. And when he came to us, we evaluated him very carefully, and when I say we were about a bunch of 30 people, came to the conclusion that we couldn't leave him alone and we could possibly help him with the transplantation.
But there has been some serious and very deep investigations into this, and they disagree with that description.
Well, would you mind to...
For example, the Kjell Asplund investigation at Karolinska sjukhuset.
Which one is this? Because there are so many investigations.
Yeah.
And
it's, I don't know if you recognize them, but it's this one.
I never saw that.
Okay. there was a big and rather deep investigation done by Karolinska sjukhuset, an external reviewer called Kjell Asplund. It had some very serious critique on a number of points against you. How do you feel about that report?
I don't know. I haven't read in Swedish this report, and it is made by one reviewer, one expert.
With help from more, yes.
Okay. To me, the only report that has been so far made very seriously is the one of the police, and with the outcome.
Let me cite some things from the reports. It says that the patients were not in risk of immediate death. It says that there was not enough scientific basis for doing the transplants. It says that it went against science and proven experience. And it also states that there should have been approvals from etikprövning and Läkemedelsverket. And they also say that this was science and not life-saving treatment. What do you say about this critique?
Whether it is science or life-saving, that's such a huge question that we could stay here for days and discuss.
But they say that the patients were not in immediate risk of death.
Well, unfortunately, the medical records that have been evaluated by the police says completely different. So we need to trust someone. And unfortunately, I right now trust the police investigation and the many doctors around the world that have evaluated those patients. You say that the patients didn't have life-threatening complications.
The report says.
Yes, the report says. But did the report has access to all documents that have been evaluated by the police? Or did the documents, for instance, know that one of the patients was not in a life-threatening complication and then suddenly he started to bleed in such a way that he became, and therefore we decided to do the transplantation? Or did the report know that one of the patients which came from abroad was bleeding almost 1 glass of blood per day and was immobile on her bed, and all therapeutics were exhausted?
But you say that the only report that really matters is the police report.
Which is not something that I say, but is what the referring physicians told. Or do people think that really doctors cannot judge what life-threatening is, or what acute is, or what very complex is?
Yeah, but this is what doctors have done in this report. It's a medical investigation that comes to the conclusion that they didn't need this, their lives were not in immediate risk, and they should not have been transplanted.
Of course.
This is a medical investigation.
Of course. That means that the multidisciplinary teams that have evaluated all these patients many times and on different times scales, that means in a more dynamic fashion rather than looking at the charts of the patients, were completely wrong. I don't think so, because an expertise is an expertise. And so far as I know, there has been no single expert reviewing, but I may be wrong, I don't know that, reviewing the case that was a specialist in the field of thoracic surgery.
The first patient in Sweden, the man from Eritrea, he signed what's called an informed consent, which is written by you, or at least signed by you. In this, it says that this represents the only chance of survival, and others disagree and say that this was not true, but this is what he was told. in the informed consent. Was this correct?
Of course, it is written black on white, and we wrote this after the multidisciplinary teams took the decision after different meetings that this was the only chance for cure by resecting the tumor. So if we wrote that, as we wrote for every single patient, not only in Sweden but across Europe and in the world, that then we did this in a good faith, writing this and taking that decision, which was not a light decision, because of course you just imagine a patient that comes to you and says, well, I know that I don't have anything else, but I'm too young and want to live a little bit more. What you have to offer?
But do you really think that everyone else is wrong? Because I think that almost everyone who has looked into this comes to the conclusion that what you are saying is not correct or not the whole truth. Do you really think that everyone else is wrong?
No, I just believe the police is right.
And everyone else wrong?
I didn't say that.
If we speak a little more about the first operation here in Sweden, there were severe complications for that man around the same time as you had the press conference where you said that this was a success. Others have described this as a case of you not telling the whole truth. Why did you not describe his complications at the press conference and around that time?
Would you mind to be a little bit more specific? Which press conference are you talking about?
At Karolinska Institutet, where you said that the surgery of the man from Eritrea, Andemanian, that was a success.
Well, to me it was a success. 2.5 years after the transplant, still alive. It is a success, of course. When you do, the more complex the surgery is, the more higher the chances of risk you take, and the patient as well is well informed. So there are risks. But one thing is to take... You
still describe this as a success, that transplant? But
there are risks that you take only if you are able to manage them. So, so far, of course, we were going into an unknown because nobody else did this type of transplantation before. But that's why the investigations say that you shouldn't have done them. Possibly that's true, but then what do we should have offered to this patient? Nothing? That's what the evaluations have said. Well, evaluation evaluates records. We evaluated the patient and all the evidence that we had by that time. And of course, afterwards it's always very easy to criticize or to take other type of judgment. But by that time, that was what we could at best offer to him. And we came to the conclusion, and I insist, many experts in Karolinska, Huddinge and Solna hospital, that this was the best chance for a possible long-term survival. There was a new report from UCL in London where they said that the first trachea on the same patient wasn't handled the way it should have been, did not have what's called a GMP procedure. How did this come to Sweden if it wasn't GMP practiced? Well, you are a good journalist, and you should write or tell as well the sentence that comes after that. I answered the UCL saying that I was shocked when I knew that the conditions by which the graft was manufactured were not the one that I was told, not I only, but if everybody. It wasn't handled in the procedure that it should have been, how did it come to Sweden? Wait, this is a report from a few months ago. By that time, we were assured in writing that this was done according to GMP facility. And of course, I'm not the one that inquires at the UCL, especially at the university as a UCL, whether things are done well or not. I trust people. I can only trust the people. And to me, it was
Aren't you supposed to follow the regulations and not just trust people?
You are assuming that I need to be responsible of everything, which is fine, but I cannot be everywhere and I cannot control everything. Otherwise, I will not do my surgeries and I couldn't see the patient. So this is a teamwork where the anesthesiologist is responsible for the anesthesia, the thoracic surgeon for the thoracic part, the cardiac surgeon for the cardiac, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And it could list you a bench of things. This manufacturing of the bioartificial scaffold was responsible, Professor Sefelian was responsible at the UCL.
And he has now been fired.
Well, this is a problem that I cannot comment.
But I have to ask you, there were several patients that died with complications and your surgery still continued. Where would you have stopped by yourself if you hadn't been stopped by other people?
What do you mean with this? Sorry.
There were several patients who died.
Yes.
And you
in which frame? Because we are talking about a frame of 12 months. And to me, the postoperative
But there was evidence of collapsed tracheas, and you still continued.
The collapsed trachea that you are talking about was, I think, in the third patient, because we didn't have any other chance to treat her. And that's the cause.
First patient had a collapsed trachea as well at the autopsy.
Well, I'm very surprised that you know the results of the autopsy. And of course I will not comment on the autopsy because of the confidentiality of the medical records and because of other legal implications. But I don't remember I have seen any report of a collapsing trachea, especially because it seems that it disappeared from Sweden.
Do you feel that you saved their lives for a while, or did you end them shorter and in more pain?
Well, that's unfair to say that I ended them, but I accept your question. As I said, we were trying to help the patient, and we did our best with the knowledge that we had by that time to offer the patient an alternative, which was an alternative to other treatments or palliation. And the report says, well, what is it? What is the alternative? What is the transplant, or what is palliation? What is the best? And now, afterwards, everybody's very easy to criticize. But by that time, when you have a patient that on a daily basis is at risk of death, and you see that from 1 week to the other it worsens, and you are harmless there, just watching, it poses another ethical question. Should I offer you a new therapeutics and wait that we complete the animal studies that will take 2 years, in the meantime you die? Or should we go ahead and base it on the best knowledge that we had by that time in 2011?
Now that there was no prosecution, do you plan to continue with these experiments?
Well, I'm continuing with my surgeries around the world, yes. I'm not continuing because there are 2 studies going on or about to start in the UK and in the United States about transplantation of the trachea. So
you're still working at medical institutions?
Well, thanks God, the medical institutions around the world were a little bit shocked about the behavior of KI and do not base their judgment on TV series. So I'm going to evaluate what would be the best position.
Will you use plastic tracheas again, you think?
I don't know yet. I cannot answer this question. I don't think this will be a domain that I recently first of all, the term plastic is a little bit
okay, synthetic.
Bioartificial.
Yeah.
And as I said, there are others more powerful institutions that are evaluating clinical trial on this. So we will know the answer. I am switching to another organ.
Do you have any regrets regarding the 3 patients in Sweden?
I have, of course, a deep sadness of what has happened and how the media has depicted or portrayed me. I just must to say that I am very sorry. I apologize deeply with the families, because of course they lost loved lives, and I must
apologize. What are you apologizing for?
And I must apologize as well for the fact that Swedish television has. Well, you must understand, it's very bad that you lose a relative, but even worse if a journalism intrudes inside this tragedy and
so you think that the documentary hurt them more than your surgery?
Claiming that the death of their beloved were caused by wrongdoings of doctors. I don't believe I have the proofs of that, and sooner or later they will be public. It is a term that in medical, cognitive rights. You are here, and you reach it. You saw the documentary, right?
Yeah.
Good. By seeing the documentary, you answer me these questions, and of course have given.
These questions are based on the medical evaluations and the reports, not on the documentary.
I believe that if you would have not seen the documentary, you would have a different opinion of myself based on the police investigation.
Speaking of the descriptions of you, now that you have been freed from prosecution, will you take legal action?
This is something that with my lawyer, Mr. Hurtig, we are going to evaluate and discuss.
Do you want me to ask you about it, or should I ask?
I don't know, I'm not an expert on legal issues. So.
Jag ställer några frågor till dig då på svenska. Om vi tar det här väldigt kort och snabbt då. Vad har ni för planer när det gäller juridiska åtaganden nu, eller aktioner?
Ja, det är ingenting som vi tänker prata om i tv, kan jag säga, utan vi diskuterar om det finns några möjligheter att till exempel väcka skadeståndstalan på grund av vissa förtalskampanjer och så vidare mot Paolo. Man måste ju ta i beaktande att hela hans rykte och liv, höll på att säga, har ju hängts ut. Han har kallats för, jämfört med Mengele, han har jämförts med någon slags seriemördare på Dagens Medicin i någon obskyr låt som en läkare skrivit och så vidare. Så det är klart att vi tittar på detta. Men sen är ju frågan vem som i sådana fall ska svara för det. Han har inte varit häktad som tur är, vilket i och för sig då har gjort att vi har kunnat föra ett effektivt försvar, för han har varit på fri fot. Så mot staten, den vägen har vi inte att komma med. Men vi tittar på det nogsamt och vi kommer komma till ett beslut så småningom.
What's your daily life like today?
Today I'm here. Tomorrow I'm flying to another city in Europe to do a surgery, and on Monday to another continent to do a surgery again.
Who do you feel the most resentment against today after these years?
Well, my team has been broken. My students, Swedish and international students, were forced to leave. The Russian authorities have been informed by the vice chancellor, new vice chancellor, or in previous one, of facts that are not correct, spreading lies all over the world and interpreting the facts in a irreal way, not.
But do you feel this confident about this? Because what you're saying is that dozens, if not hundreds of people are wrong.
No, I'm not.
And you are right.
Maybe my English was bad. I just was telling that the people are mostly influenced by the media. Now, if the media wants to be investigative, as you are, then you need to be, and they want to be court and jury, then they need to do as a court and a jury behaves, like to evaluate fairly well each element and interview each fact, and not just lying and using my case simply because I was famous to make rates or TV rates, which is totally unacceptable. This is not correct. It's not correct to send messages to the families saying, well, the doctor that have you operate, that had made a surgery on you, did the wrong surgery, coming from a reporter. On which basis? It's not correct to call me Mengele, especially because my father was there, right? So it's totally unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable to call me scandal or any other thing. It's totally unacceptable to come to my house and bother the person inside the house with the aim just to write in Sweden something that will be misinterpreted.
Our time is up.
Already?
Yeah, already.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.